Disabilities. First of all, I welcome the Minister to the House, and I want to acknowledge his commitment to improving services, particularly in the area of disability and care. And there are serious issues as regards safeguarding all of our people who are in care in nursing homes, disability centres and children's services. While I acknowledge absolutely the dedicated, committed, caring and compassionate staff who work in the vast majority of these homes and institutions, there are serious problems with the quality of care in many of them. And I believe that safeguarding legislation is urgently needed, and I want the Minister to be, along with me and the rest of this House, on all sides of the House, that we have effective action and a determined Taoiseach to lead a new Cabinet subcommittee to advance the best possible protection and legislation to protect all of our citizens. I believe this must become an immediate top government priority. We measure our society in how we care for those who are most at risk, how we look after those who are most vulnerable and protect them, and those who are weakest in our society. I started a year ago almost to find out what exactly was going on in HIQA, what information they got and what they did with it. And they very kindly, under Freedom of Information, decided to charge me the sum of €11,000 to get to the bottom of that situation. Thankfully, when I appealed to the Information Commissioner, he quashed the decision of HIQA, and now I'll outline some of the facts that I have found. I'll deal with disability centres first, of which we have over 1,000. There are over 8,800 residents in these centres, and there were, in the care and welfare of all of those individuals, there were over 8,177 notifications in relation to concerns about care and welfare. 4,600 of them were about suspected or confirmed abuse. That's over 52% of those. 1,364 related to cases of serious injuries by the residents that required immediate medical or hospital treatment. There were 2,726 allegations of physical abuse, over 1,000 of psychological abuse, and over 209 of sexual abuse. 14% of all of our disability centres were referred to the HIQA Regulation Risk Committee. 20% of service providers were required to attend meetings to discuss their level of non-compliance with HIQA legislation or regulations. And 9% of registered centres have additional non-standard conditions applied to the current registration. And as I speak, there were 51 centres who were issued with a notice of proposal to cancel or refuse their registration, and only 18 to date have done so. So there are very serious problems in these centres. HIQA, with all those thousands of notifications they got, both solicited in terms of the business, the actual home or the disability centre informing them, and of unsolicited information, no investigation. There has been no individual investigation by HIQA or anybody else into any of those allegations. There is no memorandum of understanding between the Gardaí and HIQA. There were discussions on one, it didn't happen, and that is absolutely and totally unacceptable. And I've been in touch with the Ombudsman, and he is absolutely ready, willing and able in his office to take on board all of these cases if they are sent to him, something that is not happening at this moment in time. So I think, Minister, we need your support, we need reform, we need the government to be absolutely committed, and I know you are personally, to bringing safeguarding legislation that will ensure all of these individual allegations are absolutely investigated and that we protect the most vulnerable. And in the second half, I'll deal with your response on nursing homes. Thank you.
First of all, I want to thank Deputy Fergus for raising this issue and for the opportunity to respond to the House today. The safety and protection of vulnerable people in the care of the state is paramount. The government's primary concern, and my concern, is that their needs are being prioritised and addressed. Over 23,000 older people and 8,500 people with a disability are currently in receipt of residential care in Ireland from over 1,600 service providers. The Health Information Quality Authority, HIQA, is the statutory independent regulator for residential services in the disability and older person sectors. HIQA has published standards against which it registers residential services for older people and those with a disability. These standards establish the requirements for people living in residential care in order to ensure high-quality, safe and effective services which promote person-centred care, uphold the rights of people, respect privacy and dignity, and protect people living in residential care from abuse and neglect. Service providers must ensure that all reasonable measures are taken to protect residents from all forms of abuse. They must have policies and procedures in place for the protection, prevention, detection and response to abuse. Now, a lot of people don't know that. Furthermore, operators must notify HIQA of any allegation of abuse or serious adverse incidents that occur in a residential centre. HIQA welcomes information about designated centres for dependent persons, reviews all information about services received and evaluates it against the regulations and standards. If there is a serious risk to the health and welfare of persons accessing the service, HIQA may decide to take appropriate action. A report by HIQA on the use of information gathered and received in the regulation of services was received by my department this week, and we are currently examining this very useful document. The report outlines how unsolicited information and mandated monitoring notifications are received and reviewed by the Inspector of Social Services, who assesses the related risk and decides on a regulatory response. Every piece of information received, whether unsolicited or mandated, is reviewed in such a manner. I know that there are some concerns raised recently in the media about the manner in which unsolicited information received by HIQA was dealt with. HIQA reports that in 2017, 820 pieces of unsolicited information were received related to the older person services. In the case of 342 of these pieces of information, further information or provider-led investigation on the issue identified was requested following the initial review and risk rating of the information. Review of the unsolicited information triggered 17 targeted inspections. HIQA concluded that none of these issues raised by the unsolicited information required referral to other organisations. HIQA reports that in the case of disability services, from 298 pieces of unsolicited information, further investigation or provider-led investigation was requested in 140 cases. 10 targeted inspections were triggered, and none of these issues raised by the unsolicited information required referral to other organisations. Where referrals are required to take place in the case of the children's services, 13 of the 108 pieces of unsolicited information received were signposted to Tussler's complaints process, the Office of Ombudsman, the Ombudsman for Children's Office and the Health and Social Care Professionals Regulator, CORU. Finally, I know an opportunity in the second. Yeah. Finally, I note that HIQA is very open and transparent in relation to information it gathers in regulation of services. It publishes its annual report. Thank you.
Again, to commit to having protection, new legislation to protect all our vulnerable people. And I want to say there are concerns that haven't been dealt with. None of the investigations were personal. None of those people were approached. None of them was spoken to. Nobody looked at, for instance. 1 in every 6 person living in a nursing home, and there are 30,000 of them, were the subject of a care and welfare mandatory notification or unsolicited information given to HIQA. 1 in every 12 person in the nursing home in the last year suffered serious injuries that required immediate medical or hospital treatment. That is entirely unacceptable. 4%, over 1,338 of those residents had fractures. 3%, 899. There were cases of confirmed or alleged abuse, including 366 cases of physical abuse, 138 of psychological abuse, and 68 of sexual abuse. 9% of all nursing homes were referred to the HIQA Regulatory Risk Committee. 18% of all nursing homes had additional non-standard conditions applied to their current registration. And almost 20% of all homes had to attend meetings to discuss regulatory non-compliance. Minister, that report didn't just land on your desk. That report came from my FOI. It came from the decision of the Information Commissioner to quash the attitude of HIQA towards transparency that you talk about and accountability. I have met HIQA, I have met the Information Commissioner, I have met Senior Gardaí, and I want you to commit, Minister, and I believe you can and you will and you do commit to safeguarding legislation to protect all and each and every one of these, because there are serious issues in these cases and they're not being dealt with, and it is unacceptable that the rights, the human rights of individuals, the most vulnerable in society, when they get thousands of complaints, that not one of them is looked at. And that's the truth, Minister. That is the truth as I speak today.
Ministers, 2 minutes to respond.
Can I first of all thank Deputy Fergus for casting light on this very important issue, and of course we take it very, very seriously. It's vitally important that any allegations of abuse are fully and comprehensively dealt with. The safety and protection of vulnerable people in the care of the state is paramount, and my primary concern is that their needs are being prioritised and addressed. The progressive development of quality care within these services is clearly demonstrated through the inspection reports that HIQA regularly publishes. My department received HIQA's report earlier this week about the use of information gathered and received in the regulation of services. I have noted the steps taken in relation to handling of these issues, including decisions made in terms of referrals to other organisations. But in relation, Alaska and Cora, to the safeguarding and vulnerable people at risk, of course I support Deputy Fergus O'Dowd's main point there, that we have the Health Service Executive have a national safeguarding policy and procedures, the Safeguarding Vulnerable People at Risk of Abuse. This was published in 2014, and this safeguarding policy is now currently under review by the HSE, and it is anticipated that the review will be completed by the end of 2018. So the answer is to yes on that one, and that will be completed in a couple of weeks. In relation to the issue of legislation, the Government approved the development of health sector adult safeguarding policy, and work is underway at the moment to develop a clear, consistent, carefully considered and implementing policy platform, including legislation as may be required. So the answer to your question is yes, do I support what you're saying? Absolutely. And do we commit to legislation on this issue? Yes. Thank you.